Social Affairs, Science and Technology reconvenes on C45, the clause-by-clause discussion and dealing with amendments. And we are in Part 2, Division 3, entitled General, and we are now up to TD 23. TD 23, Tony Dean.
Okay. The proposed amendment here would explicitly authorise the Minister to amend, suspend or revoke an existing order made by the Minister for the purposes of exempting a person or class of persons from the application of the proposed Cannabis Act or its regulations. So this would use clearer language to express the range of flexibility the Minister requires in order to amend, revoke and exempt those exemptions. Move that Bill C45 in clause 140 be amended by A, adding after line 39 on page 87 the following: for greater certainty 1.1. For greater certainty, the Minister may, by order, amend or revoke an order made under subsection 1 or suspend its application in whole or in part. B, adding after line 3 on page 88 the following: suspension 2.1. The Minister may, by order, suspend in whole or in part the application of an order made under subsection 2.
Okay, anything else on this one? All right, is this agreed? Carried on division. On to TD 24.
This is a consequential amendment that Bill C45 in clause 141 be amended by replacing line 4 on page 88 with the following: Statutory Instruments Act 141, an order made under subsection 141 or 1.1 is not A.
Anything further on this one? Okay, is it agreed? Carried on division. TD 25.
That Bill C45 in clause 142 be amended by A, replacing in the French version line 11 on page 88. It's a transition issue with the following: terre ou de l'attribution d'approbation, d'autorisation ou d'exemple. B, replacing in French line 25 on page 88 with the following: procédé réglementaire ou de l'attribution d'appropriation d'autorisation.
Anything further on this? Okay, is it agreed? Carried on division. And finally in this series, TD 26.
Move that Bill C45 in clause 145 be amended by replacing lines 7 and 8 on page 89 with the following: non-payment of fees. The Minister may, by notice in writing and for a period that he or she specifies, withdraw or withhold a service, the use of a facility, a regulatory process, approval, authorisation. The purpose for this is that the Minister would be able to withhold a service provided to somebody licensed where they haven't paid their fees for those licenses.
Okay, anything further on this? Is it agreed? Carried? Carried on division. Okay, now we now have the next three. They're all related, and they're all CPs. Petit Claire. Okay.
En fait, il s'agit de trois.
So these three amendments are being proposed, which go together, if I can put it that way. These three amendments are intended to improve and reinforce. Are there any problems with hearing me? So the idea is to improve the review process for the legislation. So I would like to say right off the bat that Senator Raymond Gagnon worked on this. Bill C-45 requires that the minister, 3 years after the legislation has been adopted and has come into force, review the legislation. So this is quite briefly covered in the legislation right now. The amendments are intended to add 3 aspects, and the first amendment will amend Article 151.1, which will require the minister to review the bill, the legislation 3 years after, and it will have to be provided to both houses 18 months after the beginning of the review. So the minister will have to provide a report on the public health aspect and the health and consumption habits of Canadians with respect to cannabis. There would be 1 or more committees that would review the legislation 5 years after it has been adopted. So those are the 3 amendments, because we have heard a lot of concern in committee about this aspect. There are a lot of other federal laws as well that already have this, for example, medical aid in dying. So the first one proposes that Bill C-45 be amended in Clause 151.1 on page 91, that the minister must undertake a review of this act and its administration operation, and 2, no later than 18 months after the day on which the review begins, the minister must cause a report on the review, including any findings or recommendations resulting from it, to be laid before each House of Parliament.
One at a time. You've given the explanation behind all 3 of them,
good.
but we'll take on CP2. Anything further on that? Yes, Senator Seidman.
So if I understand this correctly, it leaves the 3-year review as it is, as it was amended by the House of Commons, held by HESA. But it says it says there's an 18-month period to conduct the review. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. So it leaves the 3 years review as planned.
Right.
But in the la formulation actuelle, it doesn't really detail or give a lot of precision on that review. And so those 3 bills do that. And this first one really defines it, ask that this review, the result of it, be tabled. Yes, 18 months after.
Okay, so basically the minister has 18 months
Yes.
after the 3 years to table her report to both houses. Correct?
Exactly.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thanks.
Exactement.
Thank you very much.
Anything further on this? Senator Platt?
Whether you aren't going to ask the officials why they would be opposed to this bill or this amendment.
Well, you can feel free to ask.
Well, you've been asking it on every other amendment, Chair.
It's when I'm not certain what the amendment is about. I ask, of course. Well, I'll ask them. True. The officials have something to say about this particular amendment, or even the series of the 3 amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the only maybe observation that I would make is the proposed wording would suggest, I think, and I'm not, would suggest that the minister must undertake the review, and the original language in the C45 is that the minister must cause a review, which would also allow for the minister to appoint a third party, an independent third party, to do the review. And so it's just a slight nuance between the two, but the proposed language doesn't seem to allow for the identification of a third party group to undertake the review on behalf of the minister.
What's the wording, is the law clerk, or does anybody have any suggested wording that might accomplish that? Cause a review, would that do it?
Yeah, that would mirror the language as it's in 151 sub 2.
Okay, cause a review.
Instead of undertake.
Is that okay, are you?
I'm fine with, do we need to, un équivalent français?
So all three of them would be the same, then. Cause a review?
Équivalence à fait.
Is that your only comment? Yeah, okay, all right.
Wait, what is the French terminology?
French word, cause, in English?
Wondering whether it was just ours they were opposed to, or whether.
They déposé?
Oh, there's the law clerk, okay.
So,
All right. So Senator Pettyclerk is moving her motion with with the change of undertake to the word cause in English, and the equivalent in French is veille?
veille,
Veille.
right.
Veille. Anything further on this? Is it agreed? Agreed. Carried. CP3, do you want to read that into the record, and then and you're changing undertake to cause?
Il est proposé que le projet de loi.
So it is moved that Bill C-45 be amended on page 91 by adding the following after line 9. 151.2, 1, in parentheses, 3 years after this section comes into force, the Minister of Health must undertake a review of the impact of this act for public health, and in particular the health and consumption habits of young persons in respect of cannabis use. 2, no later than 18 months after the day on which the review begins, the Minister of Health must cause a report on the review, including any findings or recommendations resulting from it, to be laid before each House of Parliament.
But you've still got undertake in the first part, so you want to make them both cause.
I would think.
Okay.
And just to clarify, Senator, the law clerk is.
Oh, well, I already passed 2.
It would be
But
the
the
same.
law clerk is suggesting in 2, force the minister must cause a review of this act and its administration and operation
To be conducted.
to be conducted.
Et puis en français, article, le ministre veille à ce qu'un examen.
And in French, the same idea, must cause a review to be undertaken.
And change that in CP2, is that agreed? Okay, carried. So what other words do we need in CP3 other than cause to take out undertake? Do we need those other kind of words too, or?
And then la même chose.
Yes, causing a review of the impact, and then it's
To be
cause a report on the review.
But you have to say to be undertaken, a review to be undertaken, no? Must undertake,
No,
undertake
no.
a review, it says undertaken, okay. So
No,
we're gonna
but-
say cause
Cause.
a review,
To make it consistent with the other language in the other section
Right.
Yeah.
that the
Added.
officials have pointed out.
right,
Is there any other changing?
cause
Then
to be
it-
conducted?
Yeah, so in English, it would be 3 years after this section comes into force, the Minister of Health must cause a review of the impact of this act on public health, and in particular, all the way to the end of cannabis use, to be undertaken.
Is that right? Is that where it belongs?
Then it would be consistent.
Yeah.
And then en français, 3 ans après l'entrée en vigueur.
And in French, we would have the same change. So, with the idea of being being that the Minister of Health must cause a review to be undertaken, and that the health and consumption habits of young persons be taken into account.
No.
Senator Stevens?
Yeah. It's not the language, it's the intent of this that, if I might just ask. So, you know, we've just asked for a review of the Act, and now we're asking for a review, and are we, like, what are we trying to achieve? Is this sort of directive to the kind of review that we want to see? Is it another review on top of the one we just asked for? I'm just trying to understand, because this is, it's now we're saying another review, undertake a review of the impact of this Act. So what are we asking for?
What we are doing is because it was not in the bill as it is written now. What we are doing is making sure that the Minister of Health proceed to this review with a focus on health and habitude de consommation du cannabis. Yes. Yes.
Young person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So is it because we want to determine the content? I'm just trying to understand, because we just passed an amendment that said the minister must cause the review.
Ministers. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the one we just passed doesn't say what minister. It says the minister must cause a review of this Act. The previous one doesn't say what minister. But you're saying now we're saying the Minister of Health. But isn't the Minister of Health responsible for this Act? So wouldn't the first one be that the Minister of Health must cause a review of this Act?
Well, you would hope so, but I don't think it is necessarily that minister that would do it, and I think this is why it's important to have the second one.
Let's just clarify this, because you also have to understand the context that it's getting into this document here. So, Mr. Costin, this question about the minister in CP2, can you...
Right, so the minister referred to throughout the course of the Act, whether it's in this section or others, is thought to be the Minister of Health. So the proposal that the minister responsible for undertaking the development of a report, as outlined in 51.1, is the Minister of Health. And so...
but the fact that she's got Minister of Health spelled out in the second one, well, that doesn't really matter. Either way, it's the Minister of Health.
Well, yes, as the case may be, but in both instances, it would be following the thinking of the motions. In both instances, the Minister of Health would be charged with the development of 2 reports.
Okay. All right, so we don't need anything further on CP2. I think we're okay on that one. So CP3, I don't think it matters if you spell out the Minister of Health here, but we're changing undertake to cause and putting those words to be undertaken at the end, and that's in the English version. So anything else on this, on CP3, with that change? Is it agreed? Agreed. CP4. We got more undertake. We got one more undertake here. Go ahead. Oh, yeah, just read it out. You've already said
Il est proposé que le projet...
It is moved that Bill C-45 be amended at page 91 by adding the following before the heading Part 12. 151.31, brackets 1, 5 years after this section comes into force, a committee of the Senate, of the House of Commons, or of both Houses of Parliament is to be designated or established for the purpose of reviewing this Act. 2. The committee designated or established for the purpose of subsection 1 must undertake a comprehensive review of the administration and operation of this Act and must, within a reasonable period after the review, cause a report on the review, including any findings or recommendations resulting from it, to be laid before each House of Parliament.
Undertake the cause again, and do we need the other words at the end?
This one is a little bit different.
This one looks a little bit different. Look kind of
Well,
funny to put it in at the end here.
In this case, it doesn't make sense.
No, I agree with you. It doesn't make sense.
Because it's the committee, it's the committee that,
The committee.
It's an order of
So the
reference.
committee undertakes, so it doesn't
So
cause.
undertake is-
So it's undertake is fine, sorry. And that's true. And there is cause a report to be put in here later. Okay, so just as it is. CP 4. Any further discussion on this? Okay, is this agreed? Carried. Okay, now that is the end of this part 2 section. So part 11 rather, not part 2, part 11. So shall part 11 entitled General, which contains clauses 128 to 151 as amended, carried. Agreed? Carried. On division. So, part 12, transitional provisions and related consequential and coordinating amendments. Okay, so the first amendment we've got up on this one is TD 27, which relates to page 98 in the bill. So, Senator Dean.
All right, so move that Bill C-45 in Clause 160 be amended by replacing in the English version line 17 on page 98 with the following. For the commencement day is deemed to be a permit-ish, so it's related to the permitting. It's a consequential amendment from the permitting mentioned earlier.
A technical amendment. Okay, anything else on 27? TD 27? That agreed? Carried. Yes. Yes? Oh, on division, right. Okay, so now we come to TD 28, which is rather longish.
This is longer, Chair, and requires a bit of explanation. There have been, it has been clear for some time that provinces and territories have raised a number of questions about the period between royal assent and proclamation, in the sense that during that period, regardless of what that period is, that producers and retailers of cannabis would have to be authorised to actually make preparation for post-proclamation day. So this would introduce a new clause that would provide for the pre-positioning of cannabis by allowing licensed producers and provincially authorised persons to conduct specific activities that would otherwise be immediately prohibited upon royal assent because it would be without proclamation. It would authorise federally licensed producers, employees, agents, mandatories on their behalf to sell, provide, send or deliver cannabis or transport it for the purpose of doing so to persons authorised by a province or territory. And so it allows for cannabis to be actually moved across the country to prepare for proclamation. So this is, I will move as follows. That Bill C-45 be amended by adding after line 2 on page 99 the following.
Can we take this as read or
Just dispense.
dispense? We could dispense. It's rather longish. You've all got it in front of
Nobody
us.
would be
Is that
happier
okay?
than me.
So you're gonna. So is it okay if he dispenses having to read all this? Okay. No. Okay. Okay. So, TD 28, is there anything further on TD 28? Okay, agreed? Carried, on division. Okay, so that then finishes part 12. So I can now say, shall part 12 entitled Transitional Provisions and Related Consequential and Coordinating Amendments, which contains clause 152 to 193 as amended, carried? Is that agreed? Carried. On division. Part 12.1, Cannabis Act Clause 93.1. Shall Part 12.1 entitled Cannabis Act, which contains Clause 193.1 carry? Is that agreed? On division, I take it. Okay. Part 13, Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. There is one amendment here, TD 29, looks like a technical amendment, Senator Dean.
Yes.
Well, we get to try your French again.
Yep. Happy to do it. That Bill C-45 in clause 195.1 be amended by replacing in the French version line 16 on page 114 with the following. 1951, l'article 4.1 de la même loi est remplace.
Okay. Anything further on TD 29? Okay, is that agreed? Carried. So,
can I ask a favour of the committee at this point? If I might be allowed to finish up and move to TD 30, as
sure.
I've got to get out of here fairly urgently.
Yes, well, it is a consequential amendment from TD 28. Can I, first of all, before doing that, let me just finish up on this one. We're in Part 13. Shall Part 13 entitled Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, which contains clauses 194 to 206, as amended, carry? That agreed? Carried. On division, no doubt. Okay, so
You can do part 14.
I'll skip over.
You can do part 14.
Okay, all right. Let me do 14 then, and then I'll come to your TD 30. So Part 14 is criminal code clauses. I don't have any amendments for that. Shall Part 14 entitled Criminal Code, which contains clauses 207 to 2025, carry? Is that agreed? Carried. Now, Part 15, this is coming into force provisions. So I'll leave, the only other amendment I have is JS 15. I'll go to TD 30 then. Yeah, well, I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Move that Bill C-45 in clause 226 be amended by replacing line 21 on page 124 with the following. Of this Act, except sections 160.1, 161, 188 to 193, 194, and 199. And that is a consequence of another of the motion to add the provision on the pre-positioning of cannabis. And with that, I am done, if you are done with me.
Okay, so TD 30, is any further discussion on that? Okay, is that agreed? Carried.